The following is a Papi Chulo Radio original program. The views and opinions expressed in the commentaries and/or interviews in the following program are solely those of the individuals and are not views of Papi Chulo Radio, its parent, affiliate, or subsidiary companies.
Welcome to the Silver Bells Murders, the unofficial American Gothic internet radio show exclusively on PapiChuloRadio.com. Papi Chulo Radio, pop culture on demand. Today is Friday, September 2nd, and I am your host, Mike. During tonight's broadcast, we're going to recap, review, and dissect the latest episode of CBS American Gothic. Please welcome my co-host, Papi Chulo.
Hey listeners, and SBK if you're listening.
Nice. Let's jump into our recap of Season 1, Episode 11, titled Freedom from Fear, and it aired on August 31st, 2016. And here is the official synopsis of the episode. After the Hawthorne family members catch each other lying about the past, they are forced to revisit a fateful night in 2002. So before I get your reaction, just gonna go ahead and talk about the ratings real quick. So for this episode, the ratings in the demos were at a 0.5 from ages 18 through 49. So there was no demo change, and the viewers was approximately 2.5 million. So going steadily. So I would imagine, hopefully for the season finale, I definitely can see this going up. So hopefully it jumps up a couple percentages, so we'll definitely see how that goes. But Papi, I gotta get your initial reaction of this episode. What did you think of this episode?
I liked it. It was a majority flashback episode, so it was a lot of filling in on what happened in the past, and I was riveted by what I saw, especially the revelations towards the end of the flashback, which I can't wait to discuss with you. But so overall I thought it was a really good, solid episode.
I actually have to agree. I actually really enjoyed this episode, although they did obviously do a lot of flashbacks, but I do feel like they definitely answered the majority of questions that I had, and maybe other viewers had also, that some of the stuff like were left out, and they definitely explained it well, and I felt like it was believable in the sense that some of the actions that took place, like obviously we didn't know like why something happened, but I feel like the explanations that were given were really relatable to what you would expect in the real world. So I really did enjoy that, but we'll definitely talk about that a little bit more. But before we get into a thorough recap, here are a few reminders on how you can interact with the show via social media. Follow the show on Tumblr at thesilverbellsmurders.tumblr.com. You can follow the station on social media, of course. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I mean, we're there. You just gotta find us and just click on us. So you can also help support Papi Chulo Radio financially by visiting GoFundMe.com/Papi Chulo Radio. Do you have any questions, suggestions, comments, or maybe even concerns? You can email us via contact@PapiChuloRadio.com. Are you interested in joining the Papi Chulo Radio team as an on-air personality or maybe even a blog contributor? Email talent@PapiChuloRadio.com. You can binge listen your favorite Papi Chulo Radio programs by visiting PapiChuloRadio.com/archives and search for the Silver Bells Murders through iTunes and hit the subscribe button. New episodes are available to download on Fridays throughout the entire summer. Alrighty, so let's see if we can digest this episode and see if we can definitely pick it out and discuss what's going on. So I did like that this episode definitely started out from exactly how the ending of the last episode took place. So I do like that they're definitely still continuing on throughout the season. So
Yeah, I thought it was neat how we saw it from Brady's point of view.
yes, I was gonna say that. Like, I noticed how you mentioned like, where the hell did Brady come out from? Like, what the fuck, from the last episode? And I was thinking the same thing. Like, where on earth was he from? So we do see in the beginning, we see Brady is, actually hiding behind a tree, and he was actually there a little while longer than expected. He didn't just suddenly come out and had his gun up. No, he actually was spying on Garrett from the moment that he had dug out the grave, the shallow grave, nonetheless, and he's pulling out what seems to be the remains of a corpse. We see Brady is kind of like trying to figure out, okay, what the hell is Garrett doing? And we see that he has his gun up and he's telling me, you need to put your hands up, typical of what a detective or a cop would do. And on that same point, the scene changes to this other siblings telling their mother that, you know what, we know you're lying, so we need you to tell us the truth. We need you to explain everything that is going on because we know you're lying. And again, the scene kind of then changes back again to Brady and to Garrett, and we see Garrett has his shovel up and he tells him, I'm not going to go back to prison. And you can see in his eyes that he's not angry. He's not, he's more like, he feels threatened. He feels like, I have to do this. I have to defend myself. And we see Brady is a little bit more willing to communicate instead of immediately trying to gun him down or whatever. So with that little interaction, what did you think of Brady in that instance, Poppy? Like, did you feel like that he definitely, was that expected of him to put away the gun to actually communicate with him, or do you feel like that was something coming off a little bit unexpected, or what did you think of it?
I've been Team Brady for the longest, but I've sort of been seeing him kind of unravel for the past couple of episodes because he's been really into this case. And I get that he's trying to solve the case and to like put this case to rest. And so he's been kind of frazzled like the past episode or two. He really has been. I mean, like when he yelled at the FBI dude, like, "It's Garrett, come on!" I was like, good grief, dude, take a chill pill. You need like a vacation. Go to Vegas or something, blow some steam off or something, dude. But I wasn't surprised that he just sort of like came out guns blazing, literally. But him sort of like calming down for a moment and like actually listening to Garrett, I thought that was smart of him to do, and I wasn't totally surprised because Brady seems to be like that kind of person, sort of like the nice guy that wants to do the right thing. And of course, this is family. I mean, this is the family that he married into. So, I mean, even though, there was a one moment when Garrett was like ready to bop him on the head with the shovel, but
yeah, he was ready to just.
He really was. Which
I'm not going to jail. Like, screw this.
I know.
Whatever it takes, and I don't blame him.
Basically, yeah, I completely agree and understand. But I'm not surprised that he wanted to listen to him because he really does want to get to the bottom of everything. He wants to get down to the truth of what happened. And Garrett seemed like he was ready to talk. Like he was like at that point, so like the final point where he's like, fuck this shit. I've been holding this secret deep down inside,
and with this bullshit for the longest time.
Exactly. I left my house, I came back, I've gone to jail. He's like, you know what?
Screw this.
Let's put all the cards out on the table and let me tell the truth.
Yeah, that's exactly what he did. So what I'm going to do for this session, since most of it is flashbacks and I'm pretty sure since you've seen the episode, I've seen the episode, and the viewers have seen it, I'm going to do it to where I'm just going to normally go through it instead of going back and forth to Garrett and to Madeline, since they're the ones who are actually speaking of the past events, but we notice that they actually make the same type of paragraphs, the same sentences. So I'm just gonna go through it normally, so that way it doesn't get so confusing, and that way I don't get confused. So from jumping scenes, we see that the other siblings, Allison, Cam, and Tessa, want to figure out what the hell is going on. So they ask their mother, Madeline, to say, you know what, explain everything, start from the beginning, just lay it all out. So she explains that it was it was during Christmas time, from what we understood, because I don't remember if she actually mentioned it was Christmas time, but you could see obviously the Christmas tree and the presents and the minor decorations that are there. So we see the siblings at a much younger time, and I gotta say, before I continue, they did an absolute fantastic job representing each character exactly what they would have been back then. Like for Cam, for Allison, for Tessa, for Garrett. And we see each of the siblings are in the way that they're acting. We see Allison, there with her boyfriend, who will then become her husband, Tom. And we see Tessa's bonding with Garrett, and we see a different side of Garrett. And I thought that was really cool that they showcased that, Garrett was this, fun-loving, brother, and he was, playing with Tessa. And you see Madeline is, not, at least from what I can see, not being this conniving bitch. And, you don't see that, at least.
Well,
damn. I'm gonna say it. From the beginning, at least, she's being that motherly figure towards the children. So then we see Mitch come in, which I thought was really weird. Just seeing Mitch, he's dead and stuff, but seeing him again was really weird. So we see him, and he asks Allison, hey, did you accidentally turn in some payroll stuff? And we see that Allison said, oh yes, it was my fault, I'm sorry. That she had sent the box of tax returns to the firm, and she had actually sent, I think they were like old payroll forms, if I'm not mistaken, something along those lines. And at first it doesn't seem like that it's a big deal, because nobody jumps up or says anything, but we notice that Madeline kind of looks down and looks worried, and she decides to, if I'm not mistaken, go ahead and talk to Mitch about it.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually discuss that there was some fraudulent stuff, some illegal stuff that they did. So they wanted to figure out more or less what they were planning to do, because they feel like that they're going to be in a really bad jam. And Madeline convinces Mitch that, you need to figure out a way to get out of this. You need to do whatever it takes. If we need to lawyer up, we need to. You need to figure out a way to do it. So I definitely am going to need your help, Poppy, on this, in case if I forget something, because I know there was a lot of flashback sequences, so let me know if I forget something.
Okay, absolutely.
So, if I'm not mistaken, the next scene, Madeline and Garrett are both explaining to their audience, Garrett to Brady, and Madeline to her other kids. We see that there's an individual that walks into the house, and he's slowly going up the steps. He's, it's obviously this individual has a backpack, definitely is somebody that we don't know from the beginning part. And we see that he turns around and he sees Tessa at the top of the stairs, and Tessa screams and pushes him, and he tumbles, he rolls, and just keeps going and going and going. And then what was really cool was that we see a little instant scene where Tessa's at the top of the stairs, and she's screaming, but then if the lightning strikes, and then you see for a split second it switches to the present day Tessa and goes back to her past self. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I like the effects of going into the past, whether it was that or it was like them in the present day, and then like the camera zooms into a different room and it's the past. I thought it was really neat how they
how they did that. I thought that was
Yeah.
really, really cool because to me it felt like they were slowly the present selves were slowly remembering the events that took place.
Absolutely.
I thought that was really cool. So then we see that this camera is slowly moving to the side of the individual that fell. And we see Mitch and Madeline come to comfort Tessa and say, "Are you okay?" And they're like, "Oh crap." They see this man, they see this gentleman there near the bottom of the stairs. He's not really at the bottom, he's like a couple steps up. But we see that both Madeline and Mitch decide to go and investigate it, and then it cuts to the present time, and Tessa says, "I killed somebody," and she's completely shocked. And she keeps asking, did he live, or, what happened to him? And Madeline kind of hesitates to answer. And she doesn't say that she did, but she states that Madeline states that it gets more complicated. And I'm thinking, of course, it's Madeline. Of course it's going to get more freaking complicated. When is it never going to get complicated? Like, this woman just, this woman irritates me half the time, but she's so great. The actress is amazing. But this is where it gets really, really interesting. I think I could possibly say this is one of the most pivotal points in the episode. One of the top pivotal points. When Mitch and Madeline are investigating and trying to figure out if the gentleman is alive, Mitch says, he's dead. Apparently from him checking it, they state that he's dead. But Madeline notices something in his backpack or bag or whatever you want to call it. And she kind of goes in and she pulls out a Silver Bells. And she claims that it was the Silver Bells killer that was the individual that got pushed down by Tessa. And of course you hear the eerie music and the title of the show. So I thought that was really cool. But when you found out, at least from the perspective of what was told from Madeline, I'm going to ask you two things. One, what on earth was going through your mind when you saw this happen?
Well, I was surprised because, having the actual SBK, not be a member of the family, originally, the OG SBK, to put it into those words, I was surprised. I was like, wow, that's an interesting twist because I completely would not have expected that. I thought the whole SBK thing was, a Hawthorne creation, and it was all maybe Mitch's idea and that kind of thing up to that moment. So I was really surprised that there was an actual SBK, and that not only was there an actual SBK, but that this SBK broke into the Hawthorne house to kill somebody. That was really interesting. And not only that, but we saw this right before he broke into the house. He was in the car with somebody, and he was I'll call you, I'll send you the signal, when you can come in. So he had an accomplice already, and I was like, this is fascinating. In the beginning, I had no idea who this was. I thought, okay, this is a cat burglar or something like that. I mean, he's really stupid for cat burglarizing when everyone seems to be awake in the house, and that's not really what you're supposed to do. I mean, I don't know about robbing and stuff, but I would assume that you kind of wait until everybody goes to sleep. So I thought that was kind of weird in and of itself. But to find out this was SBK, and not only was this SBK, but SBK was taken out by a child, I thought that was hilarious.
It was great, but it does bring up this interesting idea before we see the finale, which is supposed to be a two-part thing, 2 episodes put into one. Now that it was shown, at least from the perspective of what we're given, now it actually eliminates a lot of the choices who we believe are the accomplice now. And I think that's really interesting that they do it, obviously, one episode before the finale. So now it removes a lot of individuals that we would assume are the potential killers or potential accomplice that we would imagine to be. For instance, Tessa. Tessa is the individual who pushed down SBK, so it's safe to assume it's not her.
Correct.
So now it's starting to...
The only thing that I'm thinking is, unless they're going to show us that the accomplice has an accomplice, you know what I'm saying? Like, if they make it complicated.
Like they try to... Yeah, I could see that.
Because they already added this weird wrench in it that SBK, like, was an actual person before the Hawthorns got mixed up with SBK. So... it'll be interesting to see. Like, I can't wait to see what ends up happening, because you're right. With SBK existing pre-Hawthorns and SBK having an accomplice pre-Hawthorn interaction, it does kind of not ruin, but it does.
It eliminates.
It eliminates a whole lot of people, and I actually have a new. I can't wait to discuss it at the end. But I have a new theory.
Because now, which I think is really cool, is that yes, they did obviously eliminate some individuals, but it actually opens the doors for other potential candidates.
Correct, and it also opened the doors in understanding everything that's been going on in the Hawthorne house. I thought, because like a lot of what Madeline said, especially in the beginning, in the pilot episode, I was like, was it the pilot episode? It might have been the second episode. I was like, that just doesn't make any sense. Like, that just sounds weird. But we got a lot of confirmation of stuff with this flashback, which I thought was really nice.
Yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. And cool part is there's still many flashbacks that they even still go through that explain the minor details that put together create this giant picture of what really happened that night that changed a few people's lives, or maybe everybody's lives if you want to go even further than that.
Mm-hmm.
And it continues on, and we see Garrett is with his old girlfriend at the time. I forgot her name. What was her name again?
Oh gosh, she wasn't that memorable.
Right.
I apologize, girlfriend.
I forgot, but it was the same girlfriend that he met a couple episodes back. His old flame, I guess you want to say, when he
Correct.
Came back,
yeah, at the diner.
Yeah, her. So we see that he's in bed with her, doing what couples do, laying down, talking, whatever, the usual typical stuff. And he gets a phone call, and he immediately, you can see that he's distraught, or he looks upset, so he immediately leaves his ex, or whatever woman you want to call it, goes back to the Hawthorne house, and we see that the scene again changes back, and Garrett is explaining to Brady that, my parents called and they needed me, and Brady's asking, did you ever call the police? And he's like, no, my parents didn't want to do that. So then immediately when I heard that, I'm thinking, okay, Madeline didn't want to do it. Like, this bitch. Like, I'm really hating this woman even more. But when he gets there, we see that Madeline and Mitch explain to Garrett that they cannot call the police. Their reasoning was that it would be stuck with them, that this event would be something that is going to be remembered for a long time, and the Hawthorns are going to be attached to it. Then, to further explain their reasonings, they decide to throw in that, well, it's going to scar Tessa. That if anything, if anybody who can convince Tessa that she was dreaming or it really didn't happen, it would be you. So from the perspective that I'm getting is that Madeline and potentially Mitch really do have this way of controlling their kids to manipulate everything that's going around. And you see it especially from Madeline, which is, no surprise. And she tells Garrett that, you're the only one that can convince or tell Tessa that it didn't happen, that it was just all in her imagination. And Madeline gives reasons to back up her claim, saying, well, she's sick, she has a fever, you could simply just tell her that it didn't happen, it was all just a nightmare.
Yeah.
And I feel like you really do see that, holy crap, that Madeline really is this conniving, manipulative person. Like, holy crap, that is definitely wants things to go her way, regardless of the implications that it can have. And Garrett, during that time, the present Garrett tells Brady, and I convinced Tessa that it was all just in her head. And we do see that the scene changes to Tessa saying, I remember Garrett, coming to my room and telling me that it was just a nightmare, that it was nothing out of the ordinary. And Tessa then explains, I actually stopped SBK. And Malin, I thought it was an interesting choice of words, because Malin says, oh, well, thank God you did. Like, to reassure that everything that happened was a good thing. That everything that happened during that time in 2002, that it was for the best. That was the best scenario that could happen. Everything after it really, didn't matter. So then, this is where it gets actually a little bit interesting, when we see Cam is all drugged up, and we see that he's, it looks like he's inebriated, but he's just stoned, and he has, all these drugs in him. And we see that in the past, we see that he is climbing back into his room, and we notice that he starts to hear things, if I'm not mistaken. And he goes out and he looks over the rail, and he sees that a body is being dragged down the stairs, which is synonymous to him explaining that the dream that he had was of a man being pulled down, because he thought it was Mitch pulling down a body, when in fact it was Garrett. Which,
correct.
Now that I think about it, if I'm not mistaken, a couple episodes ago, didn't Garrett talk to Cam about that, potential hallucinating scene where
yes,
Garrett told him it's all just in your head?
Yeah, I think it was the episode where he handcuffed him or tied him up.
Yeah, tied him to the bathroom
when he was going through withdrawals.
I thought that was really I thought that was really cool that the writers decided to put Garrett at the bottom of the stairs, and I thought that was really cool. So we see that Garrett is slowly moving the body out, and the scene then moves over to Garrett explaining to Brady that he believed that he was doing what was best for Tessa, that he was being a good big brother, that he was protecting Tessa. And he explains to Brady that I needed to get rid of the body so that nobody could find it and it wouldn't be tied to them. So during all this explanation, do you feel like it was justified for him to do that? Or would you have agreed with his intentions on Garrett's side, based upon what we're given at this moment?
I do. I understand that everything that Madeline does is going to seem hella sketchy and hella,
The emphasis on the hella.
Yeah, I completely understand that, but her sort of, I guess, breakdown of why it would be a good idea to do this, why we should do that, why we should think about doing this, her sort of rationalization of why it needed to be done that way made sense. I mean, it is a child. She could be emotionally scarred and that kind of thing. So I completely get why she wanted to, make her think it was a fever-induced dream and all that kind of stuff. So her reasoning made sense, in a sense. But it still is hella shady, because, she is just a hella shady lady. I mean, it's just a fact. And, I guess, just seeing how it was broken down for us, actually now seeing everything, because if you think about it, throughout all the episodes thus far in the season, it has been leading up to this flashback episode, because we've got little bits and pieces here and there. We had all that stuff with Cam, and we weren't really sure what he saw, and then we had all this stuff with Madeline and her giving us information that we thought was kind of sketchy and that kind of thing. Like, I love that this flashback really proved to us what really happened, and it sort of confirmed a lot of stuff that we knew, and it really expanded upon what we were told.
And I think it gives this idea that, well, everything that Madeline is saying is definitely truthful now, only because Garrett,
or at least bits and pieces are truthful. Like, I feel like, you know, she wasn't giving anybody like the complete picture of what exactly happened, but I'm glad that we got to see like exactly what ended up happening.
and I think but I mean, it also showcases that, well, that Mal, especially now that it's becoming near the end of the season, and Madeline is explaining this, you know, maybe some people would say, well, maybe she's just only changing certain things to make it convenient for her. It doesn't appear...
Which that could be true, too, to be quite honest.
It could, but only in certain parts, because remember that the scenes keep changing to Garrett, and Garrett...
No, correct, yeah, so Garrett's giving his side of, like, what he knows and what he saw as well. Yeah, I completely agree, but you could definitely tell with these flashbacks that, you know, Madeline was the one in charge. Like, she was the one always giving the suggestions. She was the one that was sort of, like, putting the wheels in motion as to, you know, what needed to happen next.
Right, and then going on through, we see that Garrett is still explaining to Brady, at least the present day Garrett, tells Brady that it then got a little complicated. And we see that the scene goes back where Garrett is digging up the grave, and the SBK is right there next to him under the tarp and everything, and he's about to bury the body, but he sees that he is not there. As soon as he turns around, he's missing. And I'm thinking, holy shit. At first I thought, holy shit, like, he's still out there loose, like, holy crap, like, that's what he was going to explain. But then I thought, wait, no, he's at the same place, there's a body there, so obviously he may have killed him or something happened. So that was my assumption, you know, once he was explaining that. And we see that he gets attacked, and it goes into this, you know, crazy little chase scene where he's running through the forest. We see that he gets stabbed to the side and stabbed on the back, and we see that they're struggling, they're fighting, and Garrett takes the knife and just stabs him a few more times, and we just see that SBK falls down and he's dead. He got gutted and Garrett killed him.
Yes.
And again, it actually does the same lighting effect where lightning strikes and you see present day Garrett there, and then it switches back. So that was really cool. And then we also see that Garrett is looking at the knife too, you know. And he explains to Brady in present time that he kept the knife to remind him of what he had to do. So there I can understand Garrett keeping the knife to remind him of what he did, that he did it out of love for his younger sister, that he did it because he had to. You know, he was told by his parents, and the repercussions was that his little sister was involved, and he didn't want his little sister involved anymore. Mm-hmm. And then it goes back to the scene of where we see Garrett looked kind of suspicious at that particular scene where he's all bloodied and muddy and with the knife, and you know, it didn't look good on him at that time, but now we know that it was just a continuation of him trying to survive, that it was literally him to be killed or to kill. That was literally his options. And he explains to his mom that, you know, I had to do this. I had no other choice. And it goes back to present day siblings with Cam, Allison, and Tessa, explaining to Mal that, you know what, that you put him through this, that in Garrett's defense, he had to kill somebody or else he would be killed himself. And you could see that the siblings are, at least from what it looks like, you can tell right off the bat that Tessa really does understand where Garrett's coming from, that why Garrett is so adamant on trying to stay away from his family, not so much Tessa, but why he was doing it. At least that's what it appears like from the type of explanations and the reasonings that Tessa gives. And on that same point, we see Cam says, well, then why was Dad's DNA on the belt? And that's where things turn for a little bit like more crazier segment. And we see that Malin says that the reason was that they had to go to David Morales' house because that's where the files were sent. And Malin pointed out that you sent, like, what a bitch. Like, she had to make it apparent that it was Allison's fault, when in reality it kind of was in that regards.
Well, no. It was her fault that the files were sent, but it was like their fault that they were doing shady things.
It was her fault that the files were sent that way. And as opposed to the stuff that happened, no. How is that Allison's fault? What I'm saying is that Madeline makes it seem like that the events occurred because of Allison. That the event only transpired because Allison was negligent in providing the correct information. And Allison says, what the hell does that have to do with anything? Just answer the damn question. So I thought that was freaking hilarious. But we see that Mitch and David are speaking at David's house, and they're discussing the fraudulent scams that Mitch did, where he took money from 401k, from the workers, from families, from children's, and David's explaining that, how can I let this go? Like, I need to report this to the authorities. And Mitch essentially tries to buy him out, saying, I'll give you $2 million, $3 million, for you not to say anything. And we see that David gets up and he leaves and says, you can put that for restitution. We see that Mitch brings out a briefcase, and we see that it's a belt, a silver belt, and a pair of gloves. So I was like, oh man, that was crazy. And then the scene moves on a little bit further, still in the past, and the news comes up and says, that David Morales was strangled to death, that the Silver Bells killer strikes again. And we see Garrett is completely dumbfounded and completely flabbergasted that this happened, and he says, that's not even possible, that he is the one who killed Silver Bell's killer. And then Garrett actually explains to Brady in the present time, saying that that's why they wanted me to remove SBK, so that way they could use SBK as a scapegoat in order for them to save their own assets. That for them to save their own assets, they wanted to use SBK as a scapegoat, because they know that the real SBK is dead, that they're the ones that he is removed from the picture. So now they're able to commit this murder and blame it on SBK, when SBK can't do anything about it because he is dead. And we see Brady's face kind of like in shock, but in not necessarily in disbelief, but to the point where, at least from what it looks like, he's starting to understand Garrett's predicament, of where he is coming from, like a sense of understanding, at least from the angle that is given to us on his face, at least what is shown. And Garrett then explains, it makes sense, and that's why all of this happened, was because the fact that I was put into this predicament, and it just so happened that if I removed SBK, then they could use him as a scapegoat. When this got revealed, were you in shock? Was this like holy crap to you, or did you feel like, or what did you think of it?
Well, at this moment, and I have to say at this moment because we get even more revelations in a moment. Yes, but at this moment I was like, okay, so Mitch wasn't necessarily SBK, but Mitch is sort of continuing on the SBK tradition. So all of our suspicions on Mitch are 100% confirmed. At least this is what I thought at this moment, because things completely changed. But at this moment I was like, okay, it was Mitch, so, part of us were right about our suspicions on Mitch. It's all making sense now. This, that, the other. I'm like, okay, I'm understanding where things are going.
And then I guess I kind of felt the same way too. Like, holy crap, that he wasn't necessarily the original SBK. It just so happens that since he had read a lot of the newspaper articles about SBK during the time, that he was able to emulate the exact procedures that SBK would do. And I thought, now that I think about it, from previous episodes where Malin explains that he had an obsession for it, I thought it should have clicked in my head. But of course, that'd be way too subtle, and you'd be like a genius if you figured it out from the beginning. But now that you look back on it, those subtle clues actually point out that Mitch himself really had not necessarily a fantasy for it, but he really had the knowledge of how to go through with it, at least from this point in time, from the information.
Correct. And it's funny because I don't think any of us, because it was Madeline saying it, I don't think any of us really believed that. I know, I don't think any of us really believed that Mitch had this like true crime sort of obsession and that kind of thing. But this episode really proved that he did, and that he knew he would be like the perfect candidate to, quote unquote, continue on the SBK legacy, because he was so like well read on all of the crimes and the cases and that kind of thing.
Exactly. And during the present time, we see that the siblings say, you should have called the cops. You should have told on Dad. And Madeline comes into the defense and says, it wouldn't have been the right choice because our family would have been torn apart. I could have gone to jail. Garrett would have gone to jail, and so would have your father. And then Madeline explains that, you were going down a dark path, Cam. And she kind of like, what a bitch. Like, she's
putting off her decisions, or at least the decisions of the parents onto their children. Like, it's your fault. It's because of you. We had to do this.
That you did this. Yeah, that it's your fault that I couldn't make this particular decision, though he is a child at the time, a teenager. So you definitely see that Madeline really does showcase still at this moment that she is still definitely for herself, that not that it'd be really hard and would not be in her best interest to take blame for all of the actions and the consequences that happen, regardless of what the antecedents were that led up to it. It just so happens that it would be an inconvenient for her to take the fallout, to take the blame for it. So I thought it really does showcase Madeline's side of her that we have noticed grow throughout the entire season. So I thought that was really, really, really crazy. And it gets a little bit more interesting where we see Madeline confronts Cam about the drugs, and she just throws the drugs that he had down the toilet, and we see that it leads up to Garrett and Mitch are discussing and are arguing about the decision of Garrett removing the body and actually killing an individual. And Garrett explains to Brady in the present time, because again, it keeps switching back and forth. He explains to Brady that, do you know what it's like to stand in front of your father and look at the face of a murderer, that he is the face of a killer? And he explains that he took the belt and he wrapped it around an innocent man's neck and he strangled him and he killed him. And when he explained that, how did you articulate his decision for saying that about his father in regards to him actually killing an individual? He himself did kill an individual himself, and he says that his father was a murderer, not necessarily saying that he himself was a murderer.
Well, because he killed somebody in self-defense while his father, plotted, premeditated a murder. So definitely in Garrett's eyes, Mitch was a killer, while Garrett, on the other hand, was trying to save himself. He was getting attacked.
Right, for him was that it was the only
Correct.
option presented. Because it was either he would still be here or SBK would not. And then it actually goes back to where Garrett tells his mother that, dad killed David Morales, that he admitted it to me. And Madeline looks like she's in disbelief that no, it can't be, that's not true. And Garrett says, he admitted it to me, the whole thing. And Garrett explains that, she had no idea, that she was horrified. And that he explains that he had told her, we need to call the police. And Madeline says no. And Madeline explains to past Garrett, that he was doing it to protect the family. That he was doing it in the best interest for everyone. And that she herself did not want to turn him in. And Garrett says, you want to stand by a killer. And he says, I'm going to go to the police myself. And I thought this was also a pivotal moment in the episode, because it showcases how unrelenting and how crazy this woman really is, and what lengths she is willing to go to make sure that nothing comes to light. And she tells him that you killed somebody too.
Mm-hmm.
That it just so happens that it will look like that you and your father were conspiring together to carry this out. That it looks really bad on you. That it doesn't look like self-defense from this angle from where I'm standing. And she really goes off to really get inside Garrett's head that if you decide to tell, then I'm going to do the same too. And I think Malin really did showcase that, holy crap, that you're willing to throw your children out in the fire to make sure that you yourself are safe and sound. And I'm just thinking, God, this woman is such a terrible person. I gotta get your thoughts on this. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, once again, I can understand where she's coming from. I can understand how she's validating what she's saying to an extent. But as
at least the
exactly,
part.
But as an outsider looking in, it's hella shady and it's hella manipulation, to be quite honest. I mean, she's basically you can't tell anybody, because if you do, then you're going to jail too. So what do you think you should do? Do you want to go to jail? Do you want to send everybody to jail? Because you're going to go to jail too. You, jail. And once, obviously, he hears that, I mean, of course he's not going to want to say anything.
And thinking about it now, it kind of makes sense that why Madeline and Garrett's relationship was strained and why it was really bad when he came back in the beginning of the season. So now it actually starts to make sense that why they had a fallout with each other, and why they disagreed with a lot of stuff, and why it was so hard for them to communicate with each other, and why Garrett would throw in these little subtle comments saying, you better hold me on a leash, or you better make sure that I don't explode, about being a grenade being ready to explode to being released. So I thought it was really cool that now they explain why Garrett and Madeline had these little quarrels and these little interactions and stuff. And the scene kind of perpetuates a little bit further, and we see Cam leaves the kitchen area, and he calls out his family, his sisters and his mom, saying, you guys need to come in here. So they decide to go in, and they see that there is like a dollhouse or a real life model of the house, and they open up the dollhouse and they see that there's 5 little dolls that are there inside the house, and each of them are supposed to be each of them are represented in the dolls, and each of them are sitting down, and they appear to be dead with marks on their necks as if they were strangled, and each of them are shown to be put in each individual room where it represents the siblings, it represents Madeline, and it represents Garrett. It represents everybody inside. So I thought that was really cool that they showed that.
I liked all of the accomplices sort of threats, in a sense, because we had a couple of them last episode with the belts sort of lying out on the couch, and then of course all the bells in Madeline's purse, and then now this. I mean, they really went all into it, because they did like a small scale replica of the house, which looked beautiful, to be quite honest, but it was filled with all the death, which wasn't so beautiful, but it was still creative, I guess.
2 points
exactly,
for
an E for effort.
Something like that. So then it kind of moves over to Garrett and Brady talking to each other, and Brady tries to explain to Garrett that you need to come forward, that I will do everything in my power to not put you in jail, to make sure that you don't serve any jail time. And they kind of just go back and forth, where Garrett kind of moves back with his shovel up, and he says, as if he doesn't really trust him that much. And Brady throws out that you said that I was a good man from what you saw from me. That if you are willing to cooperate and find the Silver Bells killer's accomplice, that I will do everything in my power to keep you out of jail. And you see Garrett is hesitant, and you can definitely see, because he's starting to run out of options, that his options are now starting to dwindle, and it's more so because he found out that he is going to be a father, that now his choices in his own mind are definitely going to have repercussions for later on in life, that he may not be able to see his child anymore or anything like that. So now we're starting to see Garrett actually starting to articulate and see forth possible consequences of his actions. So now he's starting to make sure that each decision he makes is the best decision that he has. And he asks Brady, well, why do you need me? And Brady explains that you are the best lead that we have. And in Garrett's defense, he kind of has to weigh out those options. And we see that he's definitely still struggling with that idea that, I have to, make a decision out of this. And then the scene kind of moves in a little bit further, where it goes back to the siblings and the mom. And Cam wants to call the police. And Allison says, no, wait. And Tessa says, what about Garrett? And Allison explains, we need to wait to see if Garrett comes. If he doesn't come, then we'll go ahead and call the police in the morning. Then the flashback kind of goes back previous, before Garrett comes in to speak with both parents. And it was interesting because it kind of does a redo on that little part from what we had saw from the beginning of the episode. And if I'm not mistaken, Mitch wanted to call the police right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
He immediately wanted to call the police, but Malin said, wait, let's hold on and let's think about this. And I'm thinking, oh my god, this bitch is driving me up the wall this episode so much. And she explains, what about David Morales? And she sees that this opportunity is presented and they have to take it. That the SBK is removed from picture and that they should focus on removing David Morales because he is essentially the issue that they have to deal with. That they could make it seem like that SBK is the individual who did it, but he's not really here to back up the claim. So that would be the easiest course of action to take. And we see Malin is really gung-ho about this idea, like holy crap. And she says, that we're willing, that we can even put a Silver Bell there to showcase that it's a Silver Bell's killer. That this victim was a victim of the Silver Bell's killer. And the scene kind of goes on a little bit further where we had originally saw that David Morales and Mitch were discussing about the matters in regards to him wanting to give him $2-3 million to him to not say anything, and it kind of does a repeat again of that scene, but now the scene moves to where Madeline was there from the beginning and she never said anything. She just sat there and just stared at David Morales. And the same thing happens where David Morales says, you can give all that money for restitution, just do it for that. So then we see that Mitch again has the belt and everything, and he tries to strangle David Morales, and he gets elbowed, if I'm not mistaken. And Mitch says, I can't, Maddie, I can't do it. And we see Madeline just straight up get the belt, and she already has another set of gloves, just gets the belt and just puts it over David Morales and just immediately strangles him. And you see the life being taken out of David Morales, and you see Madeline with no hesitation, with no remorse or anything, just simply gets the belt and just completely strangles him. And you see that it didn't faze her. And then you also see that they set up the body out exactly how they wanted it to be to show the appearance that SBK did it. And we see that they're cleaning up the the blood and everything to make sure that everything's wiped down of their prints and stuff. And Mitch puts down the bell right in front of David Morales, and we see Madeline just have this face, this really cold, eerie face. And it's crazy because then it goes back into the present with her face still having the same facial expression. And she says, we are all victims of your father's actions. And I'm thinking, you bitch, like, oh, you're...
Mm-hmm.
But then we see Allison kind of turn around away from the dollhouse and say, it's true. We're all being targeted for this. And we need to stick together now more than ever, till we figure out more or less what is going on.
Correct.
And I'm like, oh my god. And she says, to figure out who's hunting us and who's wanting to get rid of us. And she kind of just turns around and looks at the dollhouse again. And then the scene ends. So I'm thinking, holy crap. So if you had to rate the episode, Poppy, from 1 to 10 silver bells, what would you give it?
You know what? I'm going to give this episode a 10 out of 10. 10 silver bells flying out of Madeline's purse. Yeah, it was a really great episode, a very strong episode. I loved all the reveals. I loved the twists and the turns, especially twists that we did not expect at all happening. So it was a very strong episode, certainly leading into the final 2 episodes. So I absolutely love this episode. So 10 out of 10 from me.
Yay, nice. Ooh, if I had to give this, you know what? For as much as I hate Madeline, I gotta say it was a great performance. I can honestly say this is one of the few episodes from a show that do the majority of flashbacks that was actually really good. I thought it really did pinpoint what the majority of viewers, including myself, had questions about, like things to me that did not make sense. They actually revealed certain things that I would have not thought possible. Like, I never would have thought certain things would have connected, like how it looked like Garrett was the individual who was the SBK, or along with Mitch, when in reality he was defending himself. That it just so happened that he was put into this predicament, and that's why he had this grudge against his father and against Madeline. And it explains the beginning part of the season where he had told Mitch, I'm gonna tell everyone what happened, where it made it seem like that, that he's the SBK killer, So given that, I have to get, I think I'm actually going to do it. I think I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10 also. I thought it was one of the strongest episodes, considering that it was mostly flashbacks. Like, that's really impressive that an episode of mostly flashbacks did such an amazing job that it really moved the plot forward, and it actually gave everybody this chance to showcase where they were and what was going on with them during that time. And I think, like, it definitely showcased where the twists and turns came about, and how we already had this notion or idea of what Mitch was, but now we see what this other kind of side of Mitch was, that he was also, you could arguably say, being manipulated by Madeline as well, that she influenced him to go through with this, because he originally wanted to call the cops to investigate the body, but Madeline saw this as an opportunity, which to me, I think, I'll give her credit, was purely genius. Advantage of SBK being there at the house, supposedly dead, and using that as leverage for them to remove another target. So I'll give Madeline credit for that. That was purely genius, I think. Now, going on to the final prediction. So we're going to change it up a little bit. So it's a little interesting, because now we can't say who the Silver Bells killer is now, because the Silver Bells killer is, dead.
Correct.
Obviously, in the ground, buried and stuff. So unless the next episode they decide to say who the name of the Silver Bells killer is, which that would be freaking awesome if they do. I'm just saying. But who do you think is the Silver Bells accomplice, and why?
Okay.
For the final... I know you said you wanted to explain this, so I gotta hear this.
Yeah, okay. So, my theory for the longest time has been that it's been Tessa. And that's because I think at the start of this show, we were under the assumption, and by all the evidence that was shown to us, we assumed that it was going to end up being a member of the Hawthorne family.
Which we had every right to suspect, that's what we were
Correct. So I immediately thought it was Tessa, because she just seemed like the character that we would
leave her alone.
She just seemed like the character that would be sort of like the least expected. And on these types of shows, they sometimes go for like the shock factor, because they gave us a lot of things like, she's got this condition and this is that or the other, and like she had these streaks of anger and all this kind of stuff. So I was like, okay, it's got to be Tessa. It's got to be. And I know, like, there was like a contingent of our team that really thought it was going to be Madeline. No, it had to be Madeline. To be quite honest, it could still be Madeline, but from sort of like what we saw in the flashback, it doesn't appear that it's going to be Madeline either. So it seems like all of us were like 1,000% wrong.
And you haven't seen the promotional trailer for the next week's episode.
I have, and it appears as if Madeline is going to get killed by the SBK accomplice. I don't know if it's going to happen.
Spoiler alert, but you could still it's already there on the internet, so it's technically
correct.
Not spoilers.
But it looks like she's like tied up to a chair.
And they also said that somebody was going to get
exactly.
killed.
I'm going to assume that there might be a couple of deaths, but that's just my.
I hope it's like 2.
Yeah, I hope so. So, saying all of that, because I had to at least explain where I was coming from with like my theory for like every single episode this season for the most part. So my new theory is that it's obviously not a Hawthorne, but it has to be. Like, it just has to be a character that we've seen. It can't be a character that they just sort of like...
It better not
Exactly.
be. Come out of the
I
blue.
will really hate that, and I feel like the show is very smart, so it's smart enough not to do that. So it has to be a character that we've seen.
Kind of like, not like a Harper's Island type thing.
Well, no, because it was a character that we had seen from the beginning.
Yeah, but that was near the end though. But the killer comes back.
Yeah.
And it's like, really?
I know, right?
So
my theory is that it's Tom. And the reason is because we saw very little of him in the flashback. He was old enough to drive, obviously, because he was like in his late teens. And he was associated with the family, so he could have easily had like maybe told SBK, okay, you know, they're all there or something like that. I don't know what his motivation is, but I don't know. Just for some reason, especially because Allison in the present day was like, oh, I told Tom to take the kids away. I mean, that could be an easy ruse to like be like, okay, so he's gone. Like, we're not thinking about him. But if I had to pick someone that we've seen from the beginning that could be surprising yet plausible, I just feel like it's going to be Tom. Because I can't see it being the mayor, because we haven't seen enough of him. I mean, Cutter, maybe, because we've seen a lot of her, but out of all the characters that are sort of like side characters that we've seen the most of, and that's age appropriate, I could see it being Tom. The only other person that maybe would be Sophie, but it kind of doesn't really make sense because they weren't a couple at the time and that kind of thing. So and plus she's a drug addict, so I can't really see Sophie being competent enough to drive a car as a getaway vehicle for SBK. But yeah, for some reason I just see Tom as being it.
That's fair. That's a fair point. For me, I don't know, because originally I was actually thinking Tom too in the beginning. Up until I saw the promotional video, I'm thinking, God damn it, I shouldn't have seen it. And I saw it, and what struck a chord with me was when Allison was speaking. At least it sounded like it was Allison who sounded a little bit more conniving than usual for some odd reason. And I tried thinking, could it have been Allison? But as the accomplice, I mean, she did showcase her, I wouldn't say necessarily, evil side of her, but she did show that she's able to handle herself in a certain predicament. But it would be kind of dumb or kind of odd for her to kill off the reporter when the reporter was trying to find out information. So I don't know. I mean, part of me, a real gigantic part of me, wants to agree with you and say that I think it's Tom, only because he was shown a little bit in the flashbacks. He is essentially a part of the family, so he does have somewhat ties, and he was there.
And he would have access to the house as well.
Right. So I feel like I don't want to be a copycatter, and I don't want to pick the same one, but I originally thought it would be Tom too. So I'm gonna say definitely go with my pick, and I think I'm gonna go with Tom, unless I'm given other. If I had to choose a second, which we're not really doing, but just for shits and giggles, since it's nearly the end of the season, I probably would have said Allison, only because of the promotional video. At least that's what it felt like, that it was Allison, but who knows? But with that being said, join us next time for a brand new installment of the Silver Bells Murders. You can visit poppychuloradio.com/archives to download this episode and many more. Registered users will gain access to our archives of previously aired broadcasts. You can also download tonight's broadcast through iTunes. Just search for the Silver Bells Murders and subscribe. Please like Poppy Chulo Radio on Facebook by going to facebook.com/poppychuloradio. You can even help support Poppy Chulo Radio financially by visiting gofundme.com/poppychuloradio. Email us via contact@poppychuloradio.com with any questions, suggestions, comments, or concerns. Are you interested in joining the Poppy Chulo radio team as an on-air personality or blog contributor? Email talent@poppychuloradio.com. My awesome co-host wish our listeners a happy good night.
Good night, listeners. SBK, I think we're finally on to you after all the damn red herrings. I think we're gonna get ya.
I hope so. I hope we're right. But thanks for tuning in. Join us every Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific for a brand new installment of the Silver Bells Murders. Have a great night, everyone.